I never thought betrayal would sound like my own name. That morning, I stood in the lobby of our local bank and heard my son-in-law calmly tell the manager that Lucille Harrington, me, was no longer competent, no longer fit to handle her own life. He said I didn't recognize my own daughter anymore. He said I was gone. But I wasn't gone. I was standing right there, alive, lucid, and listening to the people I had loved most try to bury me while I was still breathing. My name is Lucille Harrington, and this is the day I found out my family had already decided to erase me. I hadn't planned on leaving the house that morning. My cardigan was the same one I wore around the kitchen, my shoes flat and worn from years of errands, my face bare without a trace of makeup. I should have been trimming the lavender on the porch or brewing coffee, but something tugged at me, an odd, sharp instinct I couldn't shake. It pressed against my chest until I found myself picking up my purse and keys and heading for the car. 7 minutes later, I was pushing through the glass doors of the same little bank my family had used for decades. The lobby smelled faintly of disinfectant and stale coffee. A pair of tellers stood behind the counter, flipping through paperwork, while the morning light slanted through the tall windows. I expected silence, maybe a couple of customers waiting their turn. Instead, my eyes locked on a familiar figure near the manager's desk. Evan. My son-in-law. He wore his navy suit, the one he only pulled out when he wanted to look professional and in control. His back was straight, his voice calm, measured, almost rehearsed. I slowed my steps, instinctively drifting toward the far divider in the waiting area, half hidden but close enough to hear. "Her name is Lucille Harrington," Evan was saying as he handed over a leather folder. His tone was polite, steady, almost soothing. "We've been managing her affairs for some time now. The memory loss has progressed quickly. She doesn't recognize her own daughter anymore. The doctors agree she won't return to full awareness. At this stage, guardianship is the only responsible step." My stomach lurched, the air leaving my lungs as if I'd been punched. That was my name, my life, my daughter, my very existence, reduced to a script rolling smoothly off his tongue. The branch manager shifted uneasily in her seat, adjusting her glasses as she glanced at the papers. Evan pressed on, unwavering. "We're only formalizing what's already been decided medically. She won't be acting in any legal capacity again." I touched my wrist, felt my own pulse thumping hard beneath the skin. The edges of the room blurred. For a heartbeat, I wondered if this was some grotesque mistake, that there must be another woman named Lucille Harrington, another widow with a grown daughter, another grandmother who still paid for piano lessons and walked the beach at dawn. But no, he was talking about me, about erasing me. The tile beneath my shoes suddenly sounded too loud, my breath steady but cold in my chest. Evan hadn't noticed me yet. He leaned forward, tapping a page with his finger, as if finalizing my disappearance. That was when I stepped forward. My flats clicked against the polished floor, echoing across the lobby. The sound made the manager glance up, startled, and Evan's voice faltered. His head turned, and the color drained from his face when he saw me standing there, very much alive, very much lucid. "Good morning," I said, my voice even but edged with steel. The manager blinked twice. Evan opened his mouth, then shut it again, his lips parting soundlessly. I lifted a hand before he could gather a single excuse. "No. Let's not waste your lies so early in the day." My gaze locked with the manager's. "I am Lucille Harrington. This is my account. I am not under medical care. I have not authorized any guardianship, and I most certainly know who my daughter is." Silence spread heavy through the room, the kind that rattles in your ribs. The manager fumbled briefly, then retrieved the folder from the desk and held it toward me. I think this belongs to you, ma'am." I took it without looking at Evan again. My hands were steady, though my heart was rewriting every truth I thought I knew. Clutching the folder to my chest, I turned and walked out through the glass doors, the chill of the coastal wind hitting my face. Inside that folder was proof that my family, the very people I had trusted most, had already started carving me out of my own life. By the time I reached my car, my pulse still hammering, I knew the truth. This wasn't just a bad morning. It was the beginning of a war I hadn't asked for, but one I would fight with every ounce of strength I had left. The kitchen was too quiet when I walked back in, the kind of silence that hums against your ribs. I dropped my purse on the counter, set the folder down on the table, and just stared at it. It didn't look like much, just a leather cover. Neat pages stacked inside, but I knew already it held the story of how my own family had decided to erase me. I slid into a chair, the wood cold under my hands, and opened it. The first page was a medical evaluation, my name at the top, my date of birth beneath it, and a line of black type declaring severe cognitive decline. My chest tightened as I traced the words. I'd never seen this document, never signed anything that allowed it to exist. Behind it came more, letters with doctors' headers, reports with stamps and notary seals, all painting a portrait of a woman slipping away, incapable of decisions, incapable of living. And then, near the back, my eyes caught the curve of a signature I knew better than my own handwriting. Melissa. My daughter. My throat burned. I touched the ink as if it might vanish beneath my fingers. I remembered another night, years ago, when Melissa sat on this very floor, her shoulders shaking, certain she was going to lose the baby she'd fought so hard to carry. I held her until she slept upright on my chest, whispering that she wasn't alone, that she was mine, always mine. The same hands I once pressed against my heart had now signed me away like a burden. I kept turning pages, even as my vision blurred. Guardianship petitions, requests for power of attorney, statements swearing I was incapable of recognizing my own family, not just drafts. These had been notarized, some even marked with dates from earlier this year. They'd already been walked into offices, stamped, prepared for the moment I slipped. The realization sat heavy. This wasn't precaution. This wasn't about love or safety. This was a plan in motion, sharpened and waiting. I pushed the chair back and pressed my palms flat on the table, steadying myself. The betrayal was no longer just Evan's scheme. It was my daughter's signature, her consent, her choice. Blood of my blood, carving me out of her life with a pen stroke. For a long moment, I couldn't move. The refrigerator hummed, the clock ticked. But I sat frozen, the folder spread open like a wound. My pulse thudded in my ears, louder than anything else. They hadn't asked me if I was confused. They hadn't asked if I felt tired, or lost, or needed help. They had decided I was finished. I closed the folder slowly, my fingers trembling now. The edges dug into my skin as I drew it back to my chest. I thought of Melissa's laugh as a little girl, of the way she once clung to my hand on her first day of school, and of the whispered promise I made when she was born. I will never let you feel abandoned. And now here it was, her signature, proof that she had abandoned me first. I sat there until the shadows lengthened across the kitchen tile. At last I whispered into the empty room, words bitter and sharp on my tongue. It isn't just him. It's you too. The truth was colder than the ocean wind outside. My daughter's hand was in it. My own blood had chosen to erase me. When the clock struck 3, the folder still lay open before me. staring back like a loaded weapon. My body hadn't moved, but inside, something had shattered clean through. The living room was dim, late afternoon light bleeding weakly through the thin curtains. The folder still sat on the coffee table like an unwanted guest, its weight filling the room even when closed. I leaned back into the armchair and let my mind run through the fragments of the past year, details that had felt minor at the time, but now lined up like breadcrumbs leading to the truth. I remembered the shift in Evan's voice, subtle but deliberate, when he stopped calling me Mom and began addressing me as Mrs. Harrington. At first, I thought it was some fleeting attempt at formality, but the word had landed sharp and cold each time, building a distance he seemed eager to carve. Then Melissa, my Melissa, who once relied on me for everything, began refusing my help with Emily. She'd smile apologetically, telling me I must be tired, or that I forgot things too easily these days. I brushed it off, swallowing the sting of being dismissed. But those words had been seeds planted in the soil of doubt, rehearsals for the case they were quietly building. I thought of my doctor's visits. For years, the results came to me in neat envelopes, reports I kept filed in a cabinet by the kitchen. Lately, those envelopes never arrived. When I asked, Melissa waved it off. Probably got lost in the mail, her voice tight in a way I didn't stop to question. I reached for the folder again, flipping through until I found the bank statements I had printed months ago but never studied closely. My eyes scanned line after line until they caught on transfers, thousands of dollars. Not one or two, but repeated, each routed into a construction company Evan claimed to have investments in. I knew the truth. The company was crumbling, dragging him down with it. And he had been siphoning my money to keep it breathing, all while preparing to declare me unfit to even notice. The air thickened in my chest. This wasn't just a plot waiting to unfold, it was already happening, piece by piece. Not a single betrayal, but a slow erosion, like waves eating away at a cliff until it finally collapses. They had been stripping me away, replacing me with a paper version of myself too weak to resist. I gripped the folder until my knuckles whitened. My voice broke the silence, low and sharp, meant for no one but me. You think I don't see? I see everything. The smell of roasted chicken lingered in the kitchen, but no one touched their plates. Melissa sat across from me, her fork resting useless in her hand, her eyes fixed on the table. Evan came in late, jacket slung over the chair, his face arranged into that polished confidence I had learned to distrust. I pushed the folder across the table, its thud cutting through the quiet. "Explain," I said. My voice didn't rise, but the air trembled with it. Evan's smile came quick, too smooth. "This is nothing more than responsible planning. We're only trying to manage your assets wisely, to protect you from making mistakes." "Protect me?" I cut in. "From what? Being alive? From speaking for myself? Tell me." "Evan, was this about managing, or was it about burying me while I'm still breathing?" His eyes flickered, the mask slipping for a second. Melissa shrank into her chair, silent, her face pale. "You don't know how exhausting it's been," Evan snapped suddenly, his voice rising. "Do you think it's easy carrying all this weight, helping you, running the house, dealing with everything you can't handle anymore?" The heat rose in my chest, but my words came steady. "I carried Melissa for 35 years, paid her tuition, paid for her wedding, gave you the down payment on your house. I carried both of you when you couldn't stand on your own. And now, when I ask for nothing but my own voice, you call me a burden?" Melissa's silence screamed louder than Evan's fury. She didn't deny it. She didn't defend me. Her head stayed bowed, and that silence told me everything. Then Evan let slip what he hadn't meant to. "We've already prepared to file the guardianship in court. You wouldn't have had to worry about a thing." The words cut cleaner than any blade. This wasn't just scheming. It was set to become law, binding and final. The room spun. My appetite was gone, replaced with a hollow ache that sat heavy in my chest. The scrape of a chair pulled me back. Dinner was over, but the war was not. Later. As I sat in the darkened living room, the phone rang. I answered with a hand that barely felt steady. On the other end was a voice I knew, the branch employee from earlier that day. He spoke carefully, almost apologetically, but the truth landed with a cruel thud. Evan had already made several attempts to schedule hearings to finalize the guardianship. He was only waiting for the last of the paperwork to fall into place. The silence after the call was deafening. I stared into the dark, the folder still clutched to my chest. When I finally lifted my eyes to Melissa, who had returned quietly and lingered in the doorway, my voice was ice. "You signed away your own mother, but I'm still here, and I will fight." The next morning, the sky was heavy, clouds rolling in from the Pacific, the kind that warned of rain and wind. I drove along the narrow highway toward the center of town, the wheel tight in my hands, the leather folder riding shotgun beside me like evidence in a trial. The coastal air pushed against the car as though trying to slow me down, but I didn't stop until I pulled up in front of the small brick office where I hadn't been in years. Inside, my old attorney looked up, startled to see me. I placed the folder on his desk, the papers fanning out as I told him everything, what I heard in the bank, what I saw with my own eyes, the lies spoken in my name. He studied me quietly for a long moment before speaking. "If you are clear-headed enough to come here on your own, and you have this documentation, then yes, we can fight this. We can turn it around." His certainty steadied me in ways I hadn't realized I needed. When I left his office, the wind whipped harder, rattling the street signs. Instead of driving straight home, I parked outside the bungalow next door to mine and knocked. Anne, my neighbor and once a nurse at the county hospital, opened the door, her white hair pinned back neatly. I didn't need to explain much. She knew me well enough to understand. Within minutes, she had signed a letter, her pen pressing firm strokes, a statement that I was of sound mind, capable, independent. "They can't erase you, Lucille," she said softly, "not with me standing here." By the time I returned home, the storm had truly broken, rain battering the porch steps. I carried the folder into the kitchen and pulled open the cabinet where I kept years of financial records. I spread them out across the table. That's when I saw it. Documents I hadn't signed. A mortgage refinance, a deed of trust. My house, the only piece of earth I had built my life upon, pledged as collateral. My breath caught as I traced the signature scrawled across the page. It was mine, or at least it looked that way. But the curves were wrong, the pressure uneven. The handwriting matched someone else's hand, Melissa's. My daughter, my blood. The storm outside thundered as the truth landed. This wasn't just about future control. They had already used me, already stripped parts of my life to patch the holes in Evan's failures. I grabbed the folder, marched back to the car, and sat gripping the wheel until my knuckles whitened. My voice shook, not from fear, but from rage. "You want me to be a ghost in my own home? You will not succeed." That night, the house was wrapped in uneasy silence, the kind that presses against the walls and makes every creak louder. I lay awake, the folder now hidden beneath my bed, when the sound of raised voices cut through the stillness. From the room next to Emily's, Evan's voice rang out, sharp and impatient. "She's not going to last much longer. We have to be ready." Melissa's reply came softer, trembling. I'm scared someone will find out. What if it all comes back on us? Evan snapped, his anger rattling the frame of their door. It's too late for second thoughts. We've gone too far to turn back. I closed my eyes, the words cutting deeper than I wanted to admit. And then, from down the hall, I heard a muffled sob. Emily, my granddaughter, had heard everything. Moments later, her small footsteps padded quickly to my door. She crawled onto my bed, her arms wrapping tightly around me, her body shaking. "Grandma," she whispered through tears. "They said you won't live much longer. They said they're getting ready." I held her, my chest tightening not with weakness but with resolve. Evan's words weren't just careless. They were confirmation. To him, I was already gone. To Melissa, silence was consent. I stroked Emily's hair, steadying my voice for her sake. "Listen to me carefully, sweetheart. I am here. I am not going anywhere, and I will not let anyone erase me, or you." Her breathing slowed, her head resting against me, but I stayed wide awake, every nerve alight. When she finally drifted off, I eased her back into her room and returned to mine. I knelt at the old cedar chest at the foot of my bed, the one that held the remnants of another life, and pulled out a tin box. Inside were papers yellowed with age, a will I had written years ago and never updated. I laid it across my lap. The ink faded, but the intention still strong. For the first time in years, I felt clarity instead of confusion. I knew what I had to do: rewrite everything. Take back my life, my house, my name, with my own hand. The storm outside rattled the windows as I pressed the old will closed, my fingers firm. This was no longer just survival. It was war. The morning fog pressed low against the windows, thick enough to blur the coastline beyond my house. I sat in my small study with the desk lamp glowing gold over the leather folder, the air sharp with the smell of salt and paper. For the first time since all this began, my hands didn't shake. Today, I would move first. At the lawyer's office, I slid the documents across his desk, my voice calm but firm. I want every guardianship petition revoked, permanently. I want a full forensic audit of every account for the last 12 months. I want a new will, updated immediately, removing Melissa and Evan entirely. And I want a trust for Emily. She's the only one who will inherit, under strict conditions. He nodded, pen scratching across his pad. "It can be done," he said simply. By noon, I was back home, the coastal mist still clinging to the shingles, carrying the storm inside with me. I logged into my accounts, canceled every automatic transfer that fed Evan's failing company, and reset every password I had, one by one. I cut off the pipelines he thought would bleed me dry. With each click, I felt my spine straighten a little more. It didn't take long for the walls of the house to reverberate with their outrage. Evan stormed into the kitchen, his face dark red, fist slamming against the table so hard the plates rattled. "You can't do this," he shouted. "You can't cut us out. Not your own daughter." Melissa's voice cracked as tears streamed down her cheeks. "Mom, please, you're tearing the family apart. You're destroying everything." I rose slowly, meeting their eyes with a steadiness they hadn't expected. My words came colder than the fog outside. "No, that was done the moment you signed papers declaring me gone. I am not destroying this family. You already did. Now I'm rewriting what you tried to erase." The silence that followed was raw, jagged, almost unbearable. Evan glared at me, chest heaving. But behind the fury was something new: fear. Melissa collapsed into a chair, sobbing into her hands, while Emily watched from the hallway, eyes wide, clutching the frame as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. By dinner, the house no longer felt like a home. It was a battleground, the air heavy with words unsaid, the clatter of cutlery scraping against porcelain without appetite. Every glance across the table was a reminder the balance of power had shifted, and they knew it. That night, as the fog pressed tighter around the house, Evan and Melissa realized what I had already known since the bank. Control was no longer theirs. It was mine, and I wasn't letting go again. The bank looked the same as it had that morning when my world cracked open. Glass doors, muted carpeting, the faint smell of coffee drifting from behind the teller counter. But this time I didn't walk in alone, trembling with disbelief. I walked in with my lawyer beside me, my head held high, a folder of evidence clutched against my chest like armor. The branch manager's eyes widened the moment she saw me. She stood quickly, smoothing her jacket, as if trying to erase the memory of when she'd nearly accepted Evan's lie without question. My lawyer set the folder on her desk and opened it with a crisp snap. "Mrs. Harrington is fully competent," he said evenly. He slid a notarized statement forward. Anne's signature clear on the page, a retired nurse, attesting to my sound mind and ability to care for myself. Next came the financial audit, pages of transfers, withdrawals, all tracing back to Evan's failing business. My money, siphoned off behind my back. The manager's face tightened. She looked between me and the papers, her fingers adjusting her glasses again and again as if clarity might arrive through repetition. I see. This is extremely serious. Serious enough, my lawyer pressed, that any guardianship filings made in this branch must be voided immediately. The petitions were based on forged documents and misrepresentation. They hold no legal weight. The manager nodded reluctantly. "Yes, of course. We'll strike them from our records at once." The air seemed to thin, easier to breathe. For the first time since this nightmare began, the false shadow hanging over my name was lifted, but Evan, standing just a few feet away, didn't flinch. He leaned back against the wall, a bitter grin spreading across his face. "Go ahead, rip it all up. She won't take me to court. She wouldn't dare drag her own daughter down with me." I turned to him, my voice steady, almost quiet. "You're right. I don't want to drag Melissa through the mud. She's still my child. But you?" My gaze sharpened. "You married into this family and tried to gut it from the inside out. I will not let you destroy us." For the first time, a flicker of unease crossed his face. My lawyer gathered the last set of papers and handed them to the manager. "There's more," he added. "Forgery of medical records, a fraudulent mortgage signed with Mrs. Harrington's name. All of it qualifies for criminal investigation." The manager stiffened. "We'll be reporting this immediately. Until then, all accounts tied to Mr. Evan Clark are being frozen pending review." That wiped the smirk clean off his face. The color drained from him as if someone had pulled the ground out from under his feet. His financial lifeline, cut. I didn't gloat. I didn't even look at him again. Instead, I rose from my chair, collected the folder, and walked toward the glass doors. The same sunlight that once felt cruel and cold now warmed my face as I stepped outside. I drew in a long, steady breath, the kind that fills you all the way through. The place where I had first been humiliated, where my name had been twisted into a lie, had become the very place I reclaimed myself. This wasn't just a bank anymore. It was the ground where I took back ownership of my life. The house was waiting when I pulled into the driveway, the porch lamp casting its steady glow across the steps. Inside, the air felt tight, as if the walls themselves knew what was about to happen. Evan and Melissa stood in the living room when I walked in. their faces pale beneath the yellow light. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I laid the paper on the table between us, the words at the top crisp and unmistakable. 30-day eviction notice. Evan's voice rose instantly, sharp enough to rattle the windows. "You're throwing your own daughter and granddaughter out on the street?" I met his fury with a calm I hadn't known I still had. "No." My daughter pushed herself out the moment she signed away my life. All I'm doing now is confirming it. Melissa's composure broke. She dropped into a chair, sobbing openly, words tumbling between gasps. "Please, Mom, please don't do this. We made mistakes. I know, we were desperate. Don't take everything from us." The sound of her crying once would have split me in two. But not now. Evan ripped the keys from his pocket and hurled them onto the table, the clatter echoing through the room. Without another word, he stormed out, the door banging behind him like the final nail in a coffin. Emily darted forward, her small arms wrapping around my waist, her tears hot against my shoulder. I held her tight, steadying her trembling frame with the strength I refused to let anyone steal from me. Melissa lifted her tear-streaked face as I reached into the folder and pulled out a single envelope. I placed it in her hands. "This is a copy of the trust I created for Emily. She's the only one who never betrayed me. I will protect her future, but I won't protect you anymore." Her fingers clutched the paper, knuckles white. The silence between us was broken only by her whisper, "I'll find a way to make it right. Just tell me you'll keep the porch light on for me." I studied her face. The girl I once rocked to sleep, now a woman who had nearly erased me. At last, I gave a single nod. "If you want to find your way back, I'll leave the light on." That night, the house was still, emptied of shouting, stripped of deception. I stepped onto the porch, switched on the lamp, and let the glow spill across the yard. Back inside, I sat at my desk, opened my journal, and wrote the words I wanted Emily to remember. Never let anyone speak for you unless they are willing to fight for you. The silence that followed wasn't loneliness. For the first time in years, it was peace. The porch light burned steady, a beacon not for those who betrayed me, but for the truth I had reclaimed.